Well, hello there, Thrive Tribers. Thank you for joining me today. I'm going to talk to you today about how teams and people in your teams can be incredibly frustrating. So, one of the things I constantly hear from people, particularly from leaders, is that they find members of their team to be frustrating. And we can all be frustrating, and people's behaviour from time to time can be incredibly frustrating. But that in itself is not particularly helpful to you as a leader. So what I would encourage you to do is to start changing your mindset so that when you feel that your staff members are being frustrating and causing you grief, I want you to start thinking of them as being fascinating. So it's still an F word, it's just fascinating instead of frustrating. Frustrating means that we've already got a fixed idea about what's happening. It's that judgmental thinking that we can get so easily stuck in with respect to working with our teams. So how about, instead of being judgmental in the moment when somebody's behaving in a manner that we don't particularly like, what if we became curious instead? And what if we found them fascinating? And then we go to, why are they doing this? What is triggering this behavior? So an example of what I hear on a regular basis is that people are frustrating because they tell you one thing and then they tell the rest of the team something else. Well, I think that's fascinating. Why are they telling two completely different stories? Why are they telling you one thing and then you know that they're telling people outside your door something completely different? And to me, that would suggest that they're either trying to please you, so they're telling you what they think you want to hear, which might mean that they're a little bit scared about telling you the truth, which might mean that your reaction to some of these situations can be a bit difficult. So maybe it's actually got more to do with you than it has to do with other people. Alternatively, it could be that they tell you one thing, which is what the truth is, but they don't want to tell everybody else what the truth is because they're embarrassed about their situation and they're embarrassed about what they need to do to fix their problem or whatever. So you can't assume that that they've told you the truth or they've told somebody else the truth. It's somewhere in between. And what you need to be able to do is provide an environment where people feel comfortable to tell you the truth, to tell you what's going on, and to make it okay for people to share openly in the work environment about their situation, or to come to an agreement with them about how you're going to manage that situation going forward. So if we were to think about people being fascinating, then we're always being curious and we're always asking questions and we're always being empathetic to the situation because we care about the person and we want to make sure that we're going to provide them with the best outcome. People get frustrating when we don't necessarily provide them with that safe space and they're not necessarily telling us the truth. And so we can't help them to the best of our ability because we don't actually know all of the facts. But in some way, shape, manner or form, we might have actually accidentally contributed to the fact that they're not telling us everything that's going on. People can be frustrating because they say they're available and then suddenly something better comes along and they choose to do that. People can be frustrating because they said they could do a certain job and then you ask them to do that job and it turns out that they didn't have the skills. But there's always a why. There's always a reason why people will tell you one thing and actually follow through with something completely different. So if something better comes along, well, that could be a whole range of different things. I can't even tell you what that might begin to look like. But what it might also mean is that they say yes when they actually wanted to say no and they don't know how to say no. And there goes my other phone. Just ignore the phone in the background. And so if somebody's telling you yes and they're wanting to please again, and we live in a culture of pleasing, we'll always say yes. And then we find excuses as to why we're not going to do the thing that we said we were going to do in the first place. And then people sign up and say, yes, I have the skills to do this job, and it turns out they haven't. Well, that's on us. We accepted their word for something. We didn't test it. We didn't check it. So there are lots and lots of reasons why people do the things they do. And yes, it might come across as incredibly frustrating, but the more negative we have in our thinking about those situations, the more we're going to find frustrating behavior and negative. We need to change our mindset. We need to actually start thinking about how would we like to be considered if we were in their shoes? How can we be more empathetic? So if we get curious, then we're way more likely to be empathetic than judgmental, and that's a really good outcome. So it's not it's not an easy situation. I absolutely accept that there are times when we are, as leaders, completely overwhelmed. We're dealing with huge amounts of work. We're covering for people. There's lots of balls in the air, and then somebody lets us down, and we immediately go to, oh my God, they've let us down. People are so frustrating. But if we can stop, if we can actually stop and breathe and get curious, what we might be able to do is actually create an environment where people do speak up, where they will tell the truth, where people are less frustrating and more fascinating. And that might actually result in long-term better outcomes for everybody. So better outcomes for you as the leader and better outcomes for your team, because they feel safe to speak up and to tell you, actually, I don't have the skills to do this, or actually, I didn't want to do this in the first place. I just said yes because I didn't want to upset you or hurt your feelings, or whatever they might choose to do. So my challenge for you over the next week is, every time you feel frustrated, is to stop yourself and to think about your mindset, and then to get curious and to start being fascinated instead of frustrated. So this is just a short Spotfire session this week, but I wanted to get people thinking about that, because it is something I would come across on a weekly basis, where I hear the word, I am so frustrated by a leader. And I think that's on us. I think us as leaders need to take responsibility for that, and we need to start thinking about people differently. And when we care about people and we're fascinated about them, then it just makes everything a whole lot easier. Being grumpy and not being caring is actually way harder work than looking after people. It is so much easier to be empathetic and look after people, but it doesn't feel like that in the moment. But realistically, when you care about people and you want the best for them, then suddenly those solutions are just so much easier to find. So go with that. So enjoy your week. It's the beginning of April. I don't know where this week has gone. My program, Teams That Thrive, is going to be launched officially next month on the 1st of May. All of the bells and whistles and course requirements and everything has now been created, so we're almost ready to rock and roll and to put that out there. And the Teams That Thrive program will be specifically for leaders who love their teams, who want to get the most out of their team, and who want to provide an environment for their employees, for their team, that is safe, which is healthy, and which is thriving. So if you know of anyone who is looking to develop their skills as a leader, who absolutely loves their team, but from time to time gets frustrated, gets bogged down in the negative, and needs to find a different way to approach their leadership skills and approach their team and how they manage those, then please refer them to me, and I will provide some information about my program, Teams That Thrive. All right, well, that's it for me this week. Have a good one, and I will see you next time, next Monday at 12 o'clock. Okay, cheers. Bye.